Hey guys, Peter here to tell you about the latest from Audrey Horne, Devil's Bell, out April 22nd on Napalm Records. The album has 9 tracks, 48 minutes in length, and this the band's 7th full-length studio album. They are a Norwegian rock band. Now, I'm not a fan of the design of this record. I actually feel like this structure is the weakest point on the album. The record opens up with Ashes to Ashes. Great song, but not an opening track. You want the opening track on the record to have the same energy levels that the album is going to give you. You want that song to be a synopsis of what the album is going to be all about. You also want that song to bring the listener in, glue the listener to the record, and allow the experience to be more fluid and more continuous from that point on. Ashes to Ashes, while being a great song, it doesn't have any of these elements. Maybe a song like Animal would have been a better choice right from the top. Then you have Return to Great Valley, an instrumental track that comes in 4th place. You put these two songs together in that top echelon of the album and you almost have a false start, because everything that comes after feels more connected, it feels more fluid, it feels more balanced, and therefore more engaging. So I like the second half of the album a lot more than the first half, not because of the quality, but because of how that first half is put together. The way it is designed doesn't really allow for a continuous motion from song to song. Once you move into the soundscape of this record, this album is rock and roll, but it's different eras of rock and roll. This is not an album that offers a single pattern. What you get in the first song is what you're going to get in the second, and what you're going to get in the third. That's not how this album works. You almost feel like you're seeing different sides or different shades of Audrey Horne, depending on which song you're on. It's all rock and roll, but it's just coming from a very different place. Some of them with more of a 70s influence, some more of an 80s influence, some of them more with a classic heavy metal backdrop, and then even some punk rock in the mixture, in order for the flavor of this album to have the energy levels that it has. It's not a big sounding album. I can't consider this album an arena rock sounding record. It doesn't have that DNA, it doesn't have that presence, it doesn't have that movement. It feels a lot more grounded. It feels not necessarily boxed in, but it has specific parameters. Now, the parameters change from song to song depending on what's influencing those tracks, but they're there nevertheless. It's also not an album that sounds like garage rock. It's somewhere in between. It has some elements that allow the album to have an explosive sound approach, feeling a little bit more polished, feeling a little bit more refined, but then there's some songs that feel a lot more grittier, a lot more grounded, almost more dirty in terms of how they come across. It all comes down to what's influencing these tracks and what's influencing the soundscape. A lot of the elements stay the same underneath the surface. That's kind of what glues this record together and allows the diversity that sits on top to take the listener through a very interesting journey with ebbs and flows, ups and downs, a lot of variety, a lot of different looks, a lot of different feels, but all of it Audrey Horne. Now, as far as the drums are concerned, I really enjoyed the drums on this album because they didn't necessarily overpower the experience. It doesn't matter if you're looking at 70s rock and roll, 80s rock and roll, heavy metal influence rock and roll, and even punk. The drums are there to really create some sort of foundation to help define the tracks, to help define the experience, and that's exactly what you're going to get consistently from beginning to end throughout this entire record. The bass, on the other hand, really pops. I really like the bass lines on this album. They used it quite extensively and had a positive impact on the experience, on the soundscape, on how you're going to perceive these tracks. It gave the songs grooviness at time, it helped ground the tracks, it gave them a little bit more of texture, it made the songs come alive, and a lot of that warmth that exists in the sound is really due to how the bass pops in terms of how it works within the mix. Now, the guitars is definitely one of the highlights, one of the cornerstones of this record with the vocals. I love the guitar sound throughout the entire record. I like the diversity of approach, the diversity of execution, how it transitions so well in terms of what they're trying to give you and what's trying to drive the experience of these songs. But it doesn't matter if the track has more energy, if it's more balls to the wall, or if it has more like a methodic approach. The guitar sound fits perfectly within the design of those tracks and really enhances the experience within the songs themselves. Now, the vocals are not one size fits all from beginning to end. There are some commonalities across each and every single song. That's absolutely obvious. But I like the fact that the vocals went with where the sound was going. If the song had more intensity, more energy, it felt almost more punk at times. A song like Animal, for example, the vocals went with it. They had the same sort of mood, they had the same sort of atmosphere, and the delivery that they provided enhanced the overall quality and the overall experience that the track had. If it was more of a pure rock and roll song, the vocals kind of went there as well, knowing exactly the right tempo, the right movement to offer. If the track had more of a heavy metal push, then the vocals expanded a little bit, giving more energy to the track, allowing the track to feel like it had a much larger footprint. This approach works really well for an album that's going to be this dynamic, that's going to offer this much diversity. You can't have one without the other. Otherwise, it feels like the sound is going in one direction and the vocals are going in the complete opposite direction. All around, this is a good album. It's not like an outstanding album. It doesn't have necessarily outstanding elements that will bring you back to it in terms of the listening experience of going first to last. But there's incredible songs on this record, and if there's one thing that will stand out is how hooky they can make these tracks. There's earworms at every single turn, and there's the styles of songs for every single taste. So from an individual track perspective, this song has a lot of quality. There's a lot of gems on this album. As a whole, I don't know, the album lacks a little bit of fluidity from start to bottom. As far as favorite songs are concerned, I have to start off with Animal. I think this should have been the opening track. One of the most, if not the most energetic track on this album. It feels like a punk song gone live. It has the essence of a live track, and it has an essence of punk rock at its core, in the sound, in the vocals, and how it moves. The chorus is an absolute earworm. It stays with you immediately. It has this choir chant built into it that makes the overall chorus feel infectious. It's easy to listen to, it's easy to remember, and you definitely want to sing along with it. It has a great guitar riff, it has a lot of melody. The bass on this track is very groovy, and that adds to the overall punk rock feel that the song has. The drums help shape up the track, and overall this is a song that's filled with attitude, and that's exactly what you wanted out of an opener. Now, as far as the next track on my list is concerned, I want to go with Breakout. This is the third track on the album. So you have Ashes to Ashes as the opening track, then you have Animal as the second track, absolutely phenomenal, off to the races, and then you have Breakout, another impactful song right squeezed in between Return to Grey Valley and Ashes to Ashes. Two of my favorite songs right in that spot. So Breakout is more of a metal track. It feels more like a classic new wave of British heavy metal song in terms of how it's put together, in terms of how it sounds, in terms of how it moves. The guitars and vocals definitely drive the experience. It almost gave me a little bit of Ghost vibes as far as the verses are concerned. It's this world of rock meets heavy metal, and it doesn't really define one or define the other, so it's working almost in the shadows. That's how this song feels, and that's where those Ghost vibes really came across and how the song was put together. Now, the verses being a little bit more direct, being a little bit more intentional in their movement, allow the track to move really well. They feel like the song is really pushing itself along. It's not methodic. It has nice movement to it. Once it gets into the chorus, the track changes. It goes from having that blend of heavy metal rock working in the shadows to be just a pure rock song. It jumps off musically and vocally from that perspective. It has a great middle bridge. This track really extends itself. It allows it for the guitars to come through, to play an important role in defining themselves and allowing you to breathe, allowing the song to breathe, and then it goes back into the chorus and you have that explosion again. This construction, the way this track is put together, really keeps the listener coming back for more, keeps the listener glued, because it doesn't follow a pattern. It keeps you guessing in terms of what's going to offer. Last but not least, Toxic Twins, Down and Dirty rock song. This is just like a club rock song. It just has all that dirt into it. It feels filthy from that perspective. The guitars sound great. They have a lot of grit. Great bass all around. The bass is phenomenal. The guitars stand out on this song, but they stand out from the consistency, from the grit that they offer, that dirt that they offer to the track. But the bass really allows this song to have some movement, to have some grooviness, and really shapes up what the track is going to be all about. A lot of the thickness also comes from that bass line being so predominant in the overall design of the song itself. It has great volume, it has drive, it has power. It's a song that goes from start to finish with an intent and an intent in moving you with it. I just love the energy. It's not a loud track, but it's an energetic track nevertheless, and the power comes from the movement that it holds. This is it. Audrey Horne with Devil's Bell, out April 22nd. Let me know your thoughts on the band, on the singles. Use the comment section below. I'll be reading those and getting back to you. Take care, guys.